Hey folks, so today I'm going to be bunging together my next Mini-ITX build, and I've been collecting the components for this one for a while. So the case I've gone for is the Cooler Master NR200P Max version 2, and the great thing about this case, it has had a number of improvements over the original NR200P Max, but it still includes the power supply, 850 watts, gold rated, along with the all-in-one water cooler for the CPU as well, and Cooler Master have those set up and installed for us. But I've already done a full overview of this case, so please check that out if you want to know more about it. CPU, I have the Zen 5 AMD 9700X, and I'll be installing that into the MSI MPG B650i Edge Wi-Fi. This is a Mini-ITX motherboard which is suitable for this case. We have some Corsair Vengeance DDR5 32GB of memory, and this will have a max speed of 6000 MHz. I have a 1TB Gen 4 NVMe, and to top it all off we have the Gigabyte 4060 Ti GPU, which is going to fit perfectly in this case with plenty of room to spare, and this is going to be just the job for 1080p or even 1440p gaming. So folks, that's the components. Let's get started with the build, shall we? And as always, when building a new computer, I'll start with installing the CPU, NVMe and RAM onto the motherboard here outside of the case, and the actual box that the motherboard comes in makes for a perfect workbench here. Now this is definitely a more budget Mini-ITX motherboard. It only has limited amount of actual USB ports on the back here. So I'm just going to start by removing the heatsink. This will give us access to the NVMe M.2 slot. Remove the sticky label. I'm definitely a big fan of the fact that this M.2 slot has thermal heat compound on both sides of the drive. And now we can remove the sticky label off the thermal pad on the side of the heatsink before installing this back into place. And then retighten those two screws on the heatsink and pull off the final label. NVMe installed, first component done, so far so good. Next up, we're going to be installing the 9700X into the AM5 socket. And because of the AM5 socket being used here, I don't need to add a back plate for the cooler, as the mount is already in place on the motherboard itself, and that will be compatible with the included mounting bracket that's with my case for the cooler. And just to note, as I get this CPU installed, I have already updated the BIOS on this motherboard, which you can do without having a CPU, RAM or NVMe drive set up at all. Just need to plug it into a power supply, and that will make sure that it is compatible with this latest generation of CPU from AMD. And we need to make sure that that is lined up with the arrow that is positioned on the socket, and that just easily slots into place just like that. Push that down and then lock it, and that will remove, with a little bit of force, there we go, the black cover plate. Make sure you keep this safe, because if you do need to RMA your motherboard, they will not accept it without the socket cover reinstalled. Now this is not low profile RAM, but it doesn't need to be, even though this is a Mini-ITX build, as the case that we are using from Cooler Master is actually quite forgiving. And we have a notch on the RAM, which has to line up with the notch on the board, which means this can only be installed one way. So let's open up the clips, and once we click this down, the clip will automatically close. So the RAM is nicely seated, and we do the same with the other stick. There we go, perfect. Okay, so I've just cleaned things up a bit. It's time to bring out the case. So we have the accessory box. This has got the components in for mounting the CPU cooler onto the motherboard, along with a number of other bits as well, which no doubt we'll need as we go along here. Here we go. And just to make life easier, we're going to take a lot of the panels off the case so that we have room to manoeuvre about inside as we're building. The panels are just clipped in on the side, so we can literally just pull those off. There's no need to unscrew them. They do have removable magnetic dust filters as well. Remove the second panel. We can also remove the front panel, same way. And we may not need to do that because I'm not going to be mounting anything on the front, but as you can see, it does give us this space. I could put my hand in here if need be as we're building, so I am going to take this off. If I turn this round to the back, we have the PCI mounting brackets. We need to remove this panel completely, and we do that with 4 screws, 2 down here and 2 on this side. There we go. With the screws removed, that easily is lifted off. We can take the top off. I'm not going to bother with that because the heatsink and fans for that are nicely installed, so I'm not going to mess with it. Cooler Master have done that hard work for us. There's one screw down at the bottom, however, so let's remove that. And all of these case screws are the same type of screws, so you don't need to worry about mixing them up. With that one screw removed, we can go ahead and just shimmy this off. There we go. This also has a magnetic dust filter, and now we're going to have full access to the case through the bottom as well, which is going to be a big help to us. And you can see inside here, we have the radiator and fans at the top here as part of the all-in-one cooler that is included. We have the CPU block, of course, and we have the modular PSU, 850 watt, gold rated, with those modular cables already in place. I have gone ahead and removed the SATA cables along with some of the PCI Express cables I'm not going to be needing. But let's go ahead now and lie the case down onto its back. So the cables I need are the 24-pin ATX power cable. Which one's this? The PCI Express. This actually has two PCI Express connections on it. I only need one. We have the CPU power connector, so the motherboard has an 8-pin connector. Two 4-pin connectors will go together to use that. And then we have the auxiliary connections here, including USB 3 for the front panel power, I believe that one is, so for the power switch, etc. We have the front panel audio, and we have USB-C connector. So 4 connections there for the front panel. For now, we can shimmy all these cables out of the way. You can see though that by taking all of the sides off, it's just going to make building in this thing so much more convenient. And just including some of the zip ties that came with the case, I have routed through the CPU 8-pin power connector to the side of the power supply here. Hopefully still enough room to actually get this installed. I don't know whether it's best to install the 8-pin power connector now before installing the motherboard, but I'm going to try and do it after. If not, I'll have to take the board out and then put it back in again. So this is where things can get a little bit fiddly. So we'll just make sure the I/O is going into place here. And that's gone in quite nicely without too much trouble whatsoever. Routing that cable really has helped. So let's go ahead and screw this down. Okay, motherboard all secured. There's only 4 screws because of it being a Mini-ITX board. So now we have the joy of trying to squeeze the 2 4-pin connectors here into one 8-pin connector slot right here. It's a little bit difficult to get a good angle of this, so I'm going to have to just do it and then come back to you. I'm not sure if you guys can see this, but it is set up now and connected. It wasn't too bad, I just had to lift the case up in order to fiddle about with it. Having the other side panel removed, again, just made that so much easier than it otherwise would be. Since the ATX 24-pin connector is going to be covering up some of these other connectors on the motherboard, I'm going to install this a little bit later. For now, let's go ahead with all the front panel connectors. Beginning with the USB-C, and that just slots into there. USB 3 next. By the way, those things, the USB 3 connectors, can be an absolute pain to remove. So make sure you have the cables as you want them before plugging it in, or have fun trying to get that back out again. We've got the front panel, which I have to say is a super tight squeeze over here. And because it's such a tight fit, there's not a whole lot I can do with this cable, unfortunately, to hide it. And finally, we have the audio connector for the front panel, and that is a little bit longer. Okay, so now I'm going to install the included mounting brackets that came with the case on my CPU block, and this does come with all of the brackets and back plates that you need depending on what socket you are going to be installing to. So I'm using the AMD ones, and to do that we just take the bracket, rest it on the outside of the block as such, and then screw from the inside in order to secure into place. And then remove the plastic cover. And now, before we actually install the CPU block, we mustn't forget about our thermal paste. To be honest, it came out quite lively there from the tube. I probably shouldn't have put that much on, but it should be okay as long as it doesn't all start splattering out the sides. And now we just need to hook the clips. There's the first one, there's the second one. And then fortunately, it's just a couple of thumb screws to tighten. So it might be tricky to see this, but we have 2 connectors here called jumper connectors, and we have to plug in these 2. Now this here, connected to the block, is known as the pump connector, and the other one which is powering these two fans, is known as the CPU fan connector. The two are right there. The one closest to the power supply is going to be for the pump. The one closest to the RAM is going to be for the CPU fans. Right, so I've managed to push these cables out of the way as much as possible. Just here, again, I know a little difficult to see on camera, but that is the 24-pin power connector for the motherboard, so we're going to go ahead and plug that in next. Again, this is a little bit awkward and it is actually quite a tight fit, so make sure you really get it in correctly or you're not going to be able to turn your computer on. And I think I heard that click. And so all that's left for us to do now is get the GPU installed, my 4060 Ti. And we're going to start by removing these two brackets here and mounting the GPU. Before I actually put this into place though, I do want to get the PCI Express cable set up in position. So we'll just plug that straight in and then we'll reconnect the main bracket here. There we go. That's going to look really good. And if you remember, we took 4 screws out for this bracket. Make sure we remove the sticky labels. Always check your graphics card for these sorts of things because they might not help with the heat dissipation if you leave them on. And here I have the included riser cable that Cooler Master have put in with this case. This is a Gen 4 cable, so it will support the latest speeds from the current GPUs. And installing this, we just remove the cover off the GPU there, and we just need to slot this down into the PCI Express slot. So we do need to open the catch, which just clicks open if it's not already, and we fit that down there until it clicks into place. Can be a little bit tight, but just be careful with these riser cables because they are quite delicate. The catch should automatically move into position there, and then we can do the same with the GPU. So let's go ahead and open that and then fit that over the top. There we go, and that clicks into place. So the GPU should now be good to go. Okay, folks, so everything has now been installed here. So all the hardware is in. What I'm going to do is get the place tidied up a bit, get the panels back onto the case, always important, and then we'll plug it in and see how it all works. Right, so I've got Windows installed, got all the updates for Windows installed, got the drivers set up correctly. Everything's working as expected, and I have a system stability test running here in Ada 64. It's just been going for over 15 minutes. And as you can see, or maybe you can't on camera, but I'll tell you anyway, the CPU has peaked at 76 degrees, and the actual idle temperature is about 45 degrees. In terms of the GPU, it's currently peaking at about 77 degrees, and this is with all of the stress tests including FPU active. FPU absolutely hammers the system, so make sure you do have that enabled when you are doing these tests. But yeah, temperatures are pretty decent. I do actually have this 15mm low profile fan from Noctua, and you can install 2 of these low profile fans at the bottom of the case, but I'm not going to do so unless I feel it's needed, as I could probably use this for another build anyway. So some respectable temperatures there. This is of course on stock settings. I'm going to stop that test now, and I'm going to enable the Precision Boost Overdrive. The only other setting I've currently got enabled is XMP in the BIOS setting, which I always turn on because you want to get the most out of your memory. So here I am back in the BIOS. By the way, enabling XMP was just a simple case of hitting this one button here. That's all I needed. Right, to enable Precision Boost Overdrive, head into the advanced settings and then go down to AMD overclocking, accept that thing there, and all we need to do is go to Precision Boost Overdrive and change it from auto to enabled. You can fiddle about with the settings if you want. I'm not going to do that. And then you just need to save and reboot. So let's go ahead. Now there is a little bit of a bug, by the way. If I exit out of this and then go to save and exit, it says I've not made any changes despite the fact that I've just enabled Precision Boost Overdrive. So if we go back and head back to AMD overclocking, you can see if we go back to Precision Boost Overdrive, it is still on enabled. So I think it's just a bug saying that we've not made any changes, even though we have. So I'm just going to select yes there, and that does actually, as far as I know, keep it enabled. But we can log back into the BIOS just to check that after the reboot. Okay, so back in the BIOS, settings, advanced, and if we have a look now, I haven't done anything in the BIOS since I've reloaded. We can see it is still enabled. So yeah, just a glitch, I think, with this current BIOS firmware, that it doesn't detect you've made this change when saving, but it is actually still saving it, if that makes sense. So let's go ahead and reload into Windows. So with the PBO boost enabled, you can actually see here that the temperatures are getting pretty darn high. The maximum CPU temperature has now reached 96 degrees. Okay, GPU hasn't really changed. That's still hitting into the high 70s. But yeah, PBO is definitely going to have an impact on your overall temperatures, which means that you are going to be noticing increased fan speeds, more heat, maybe just in your general room and environment. And if you are constantly pushing the CPU to these limits, it's probably going to reduce the overall lifespan as well. So just factor that in mind. But of course, to equate against all of that, you are going to be getting more out of it, including up to about 10% boost in performance. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this test for now. Okay, so the system has been built. It seems to be working. It's been stress tested as well. I hope you've enjoyed this video of me building with the Cooler Master NR200P version 2 Max case, along with the Ryzen 9700X CPU. I do hope that it has been helpful to you as well. And there's a number of things I'm going to want to do now with this system before I hand it over to my stepson, and that's ultimately who I built this for. But thank you for checking out the video. Have a great day, and I'll catch you next time.